Prabhupada had replied, "You cannot understand because you are crazy." And when a lady had put forward materialistic welfare work as the highest good, Prabhupada had replied, "Your compassion is as valuable as blowing on a boil to heal it." Only a few disciples were with Prabhupada in Rishikesh, and they had deemed it a wonderful treat. Not only had Prabhupada directed the cooking, but he had told stories while cooking. He said that only a lazy man couldn't cook, and then he told a Bengali story, the story of a lazy man to illustrate. There was a king who decided that all lazy men in his kingdom could come to the charity house and be fed. So many men came, all claiming, "I'm a lazy man." The king then told his minister to set fire to the charity house, and all but 2 men ran out of the burning building. One of the 2 said, "My back is becoming very hot from the fire," and the other advised, "Just turn over to the other side." The king then said, "These are actually lazy men. Feed them." But on the evening of May 15th, Srila Prabhupada could neither sleep nor work at his dictation. The storm, a harbinger of the monsoon season, knocked out all electric power in Rishikesh. Since the fans were not running and the window shutters had to be closed because of the wind, the room became very hot. At 5 in the morning, Srila Prabhupada called for Tamal Krishna Goswami and said he was feeling weak. Tamal Krishna massaged Prabhupada for an hour. Even at dawn, the wind did not let up and the sand was blowing. The storm and power failure continued the next night. Tamal Krishna asked Prabhupada about the swelling in his hands and feet, and Prabhupada replied, annoyed, Why are you bothering? Why are you bothering? It is my body and I'm not disturbed." But then he added, "From the material point of view, it is not good. Please consider how everything may be turned over to the GBC, so that in my absence everything will go on. You may make a will and I will sign it." He was talking definitely about things that before he had only alluded to. Suddenly at 1:30 a.m., Prabhupada rang his bell and Tamal Krishna and Shirachor Gopinath responded. From beneath his mosquito net, he said, "As I was telling you, the symptoms are not good. I want to leave immediately for Vrindavan." If it was time for him to pass away, he said, then let it be in Vrindavan. Since he wanted to leave immediately, the devotees stayed up all night packing and preparing to leave. Train reservations were not available, however, so they decided to go by car. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 14, The Forest of Enjoyment, Text 30. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay, so I'll read the Sanskrit myself. Yada pakandibi atma vanchitais tai uruvanchito brahmakulam samavasangas sham shilam upanayanadi shrotasmata kamanushtanena bhagavato yagya purushasya radhanam eva tadarochayan shudrakulam Bhajate nigamachere shurito yasya mitani bhava kutumba bharanam yata vanarajate. Please repeat. Yada, when, pankandibi, by pashandis, godless atheists, atmavanchitai, who themselves are cheated, tai, by them, uru, more and more, vanchita, being cheated, brahmakulam, the bona fide Brahmins strictly following the Vedic culture, samavasan, settling among them to advance spiritually, tesham, of them, the Brahmins who strictly follow Vedic principles, shilam, the good character, upanayana adi, beginning with offering the sacred thread or training the conditioned soul to qualify as a bona fide Brahmana. Shrota, according to the Vedic principles. Smarta, according to the authorized scriptures derived from the Vedas. Karma anushtanena, the performance of activities. Bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yaga Purushasya, who is worshipped by Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Aradhanam, the process of worshipping him. Eva, certainly. Tat arochayan, not finding pleasure in it, due to its being difficult for unscrupulous persons to perform. Shudrakulam, the society of Shudras. Bhajate, he turns to. Nigama Achare, in behaving according to Vedic principles. Ashuddhita, not purified. Yasya, of whom? Mituni bhava, sex enjoyment, or the materialistic way of life. Kutumba bharanam, the maintenance of the family. Yata, as it is. Vanarajate, of the society of monkeys, or the descendants of the monkey. Translation. The pseudo-swamis, yogis, and incarnations who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead are known as pashandis. They themselves have fallen and cheated because they do not know the real path of spiritual advancement, and whoever goes to them is certainly cheated in his turn. When one is thus cheated, he sometimes takes shelter of the real followers of Vedic principles, Brahmins or those in Krishna consciousness, who teach everyone how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the Vedic rituals. However, being unable to stick to these principles, these rascals again fall down and take shelter among Shudras who are very expert in making arrangements for sex indulgence. Sex is very prominent among animals like monkeys, and such people who are enlivened by sex may be called descendants of monkeys. Please repeat. The pseudo-swamis, yogis, and incarnations who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead are known as Parshundis. They themselves have fallen and cheated because they do not know the real path of spiritual advancement. And whoever goes to them is certainly cheated in his turn. When one is thus cheated, he sometimes takes shelter of the real followers of Vedic principles. Brahmins or those in Krishna consciousness, who teach everyone how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the Vedic rituals. However, being unable to stick to these principles, these rascals again fall down and take shelter among Shudras, who are very expert in making arrangements for sex indulgence. Sex is very prominent among animals like monkeys, and such people who are enlivened by sex may be called descendants of monkeys. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki. By fulfilling the process of evolution from the aquatics to the animal platform, a living entity eventually reaches the human form. The three modes of material nature are always working in the evolutionary process. Those who come to the human form through the quality of Sattva-gun were cows in their last animal incarnation. Those who come to the human form through the quality of Rajagun were lions in their last animal incarnation. And those who come to human form through the quality of Tamagun were monkeys in their last animal incarnation. In this age, those who come through the monkey species are considered by modern anthropologists like Darwin to be descendants of monkeys. We receive information herein that those who are simply interested in sex are actually no better than monkeys. Monkeys are very expert in sexual enjoyment, and sometimes sex glands are taken from monkeys and placed in the human body so that a human being can enjoy sex in old age. In this way, modern civilization has advanced. Many monkeys in India were caught and sent to Europe so that their sex glands could serve as replacements for those of old people. Those who actually descend from the monkeys are interested in expanding their aristocratic families through sex. In the Vedas, there are also certain ceremonies especially meant for sexual improvement and promotion to higher planetary systems where the demigods are enjoying sex. The demigods are also very much inclined towards sex because that is the basic principle of material enjoyment. First of all, the conditioned soul is cheated by so-called swamis, yogis, and incarnations when he approaches them to be relieved of material miseries. When the conditioned soul is not satisfied with them, he comes to devotees and pure Brahmins who try to elevate him for final liberation from material bondage. However, the unscrupulous conditioned soul cannot rigidly follow the principles prohibiting illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat-eating. Thus he falls down and takes shelter of people who are like monkeys. In the Krishna consciousness movement, these monkey disciples being unable to follow the strict regulative principles, sometimes fall down and try to form societies based on sex. This is proof that such people are descendants of monkeys, as confirmed by Darwin. In this verse, it is therefore clearly stated, Yata Vanara Jate. So that's amazing. Here in this verse, Srila Prabhupada is actually immortalizing those. He's immortalizing those monkey disciples in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. I suspect when they read this, then they, they were so embarrassed that perhaps they. Sorry? Yeah, if they read it. But I'm sure some of them did read it. It's interesting, Srila Prabhupada he actually says in the Krishna consciousness movement, he's not saying in the Guru Parampara, so he's not referring to necessarily Sahajas in the last century or 2 centuries ago, but he's specifically talking about his own disciples. So it's like he's been very merciful by really preaching very heavily through this verse. Amagyanativandasya gananjana shlakaya chakshurmanitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapatam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupagadhamayam Gadati Swapatantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragana Tanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivashakan Vitam Scha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Paritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sarigora Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I've just seen the next verse, so I'm just going to, it's going to help me sort of condense my class. Because in the next verse, in the translation, Srila Prabhupada says, in this way the descendants of the monkeys intermingle with each other, and they are generally known as Shudras. Without hesitating, they live and move freely, not knowing the goal of life. So, yeah, it strikes me that here Srila Prabhupada is talking about a class of human being who consider themselves really streetwise people. They're thinking that they've got the system sussed. They're not going to work so hard, but they're just going to make enough money so they can enjoy sex, so they can enjoy the sunshine, go on holiday to sunny places, have nice cars, but not work too hard. And they generally think that everybody else is like just slaves of the system. And that's especially prominent in the 20th century. And it was brought about really to a great degree by the collapse of moral government. Some people may argue that there's never been moral government outside of Krishna consciousness, but at least there was an attempt. At least morality was high on the agenda of what was discussed. There was constant discussion about how to apply, let's say, the principles of Jesus Christ in government or in family life. And from time to time, there may have been political revolutions, but even those revolutionaries were people who were willing to die for what they believed in. But then with the advent of what's called moral relativism and empiricism and rationalism, where everything is just reduced to understanding the atomic nature of chemical reactions, and human interaction is just considered to be what's called an epiphenomenon, that so-called love and relationships and philosophical introspection, that these are all kind of illusions, and the only real reality is sex, basically. And that's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita about the demons. They say that, what's anyone?
This world is unreal, with no God in control. They say that the use of sex is out and has no cause other than lust.
Yeah. So it's, although the Shudras, they haven't read the Bhagavad Gita, but you would think that they have read it, because they're so good at that way of life.
It says a sushi brother.
Yeah, take that unclean vows. Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. They've taken unclean vows. Yeah, I'm going to be like, although they haven't taken the vow to be dirty in a dirty sense. They like to be clean so they can attract the opposite sex, so they can engage in very dirty habits. So, yeah, and various philosophers in the 18th and 19th centuries kind of exacerbated this, like, moral degradation. One of them was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who actually in his writings was very perceptive of the nature of moral degradation. If you read his books, you would think that he was almost a saint, but actually he went around having sex here, there, and everywhere, and just abandoning all of his children and giving them to orphanages. He had 5 children to one of his admirers, and he left all the children in an orphanage and went off to continue his literary career. And then there was Friedrich Nietzsche, who could understand that very soon the kind of moral fiber of society was going to be completely ripped out, and that the general populace weren't going to look for it elsewhere. They weren't going to reject Christianity and turn to some other highly moral worldview, but they were just going to become pawns for exploitation by very cruel people. And that's how, like, totalitarianism came about in Russia and in China. And it's very interesting that when I was about 15 or 16 years old at school in England, then a school magazine came out, and in the magazine it listed the favorite books of the children at school, and all of the children who were like 3 years older than me, by far their most favorite book was Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, which was like written by a Russian who revealed the horror of concentration camps in Russia. And then he went to the West, he went to America, but having been in America, he actually kind of felt that, that the American Constitution, trust in God and based on Christian morals, was actually far superior to the Russian, atrocities and labor camps and propaganda. But having been in America for a few years, he saw that actually the same disease was there, in the sense that when there's no spiritual or moral obligation to act for the well-being of a higher spiritual cause, then very, very quickly the whole population just become monkeys, basically. And this is a very underrated aspect of the human nature, which no one really wants to admit, that they could become like completely degraded in a very short time. Everyone likes, even the Shudras, even those persons who are addicted to sex and whose family life just revolves around getting an attractive partner and making as much money as possible and having the nicest holidays and working as little as possible and screwing the system. Even those people think that they're nice people. They think they're nice people and that they've got nice friends, and I'll always stick up for you, mate. I'll always stick up for you. They think they're nice people. But actually, when society, when there's an economic collapse and like mob rule comes in, then they're not joining, they're not thinking, okay, the society is completely going to the dogs. We have to become very strong to protect the next generation. They're not like that. No, they're out looting and just trying to get as much for themselves as possible, and they'll engage in unlimitedly degraded activities just to satisfy their tongues and bellies. So but here now I'm talking about the third person, but really I should be talking about the first person. The last word in this verse that we're looking at today is Vanara Jate, of the society of monkeys, or the descendants of the monkey. So when I was, even though I went to that school where everybody was reading Solzhenitsyn, it was kind of like a grammar school at that time, or at least those children who were in the sixth form, it had been a grammar school, but it became a comprehensive school when I joined. But anyway, even when it was a grammar school, everybody was being taught that Darwinism was irrefutable, the irrefutable theory of the existence of human life. So, I'm not only am I a descendant of the monkey, because I'm a descendant of those people who just accepted that we're all monkeys. Even though my parents were definitely austere people who sacrificed their lives and to a great degree just to try to give me a moral education. But they never went to school to complain that I was being brainwashed to believe that we're all descended from monkeys. In fact, nobody did that. In fact, in our school, there was only one boy who wouldn't go to the classes, because ours was a Protestant school, but there was one boy who was a Catholic. And I don't know why his parents sent him to the Protestant school, but they wouldn't have him go to the lessons on biology when those lessons were talking about evolutionary theory. So we've all been heavily brainwashed by this completely hedonistic theory of the evolution of the human species. So when Srila Prabhupada in the beginning of the purport talks about the process of evolution from the aquatics to the animal platform, by which a living entity eventually reaches the human form, then he's not talking about Darwinian evolution, but he's talking about evolution as described in the Vedas. Evolution or the transmigration of the jiva, of the spirit soul, through progressively more developed bodily forms, by which the jiva can live out their desire for different varieties of sense gratification, so that when they come to the human form of life, they perhaps are a little satiated with that kind of hedonistic and also very fearful existence. And if they're fortunate enough to be born into a society that understands and teaches this process of transmigration, then they'll actually look for people who are progressive in their attempt to get out of the material entanglement altogether. So it's interesting, Shyama Sundara and Srila Prabhupada, they went to Russia in 1971, which was around about the time Solzhenitsyn he hadn't quite risen to fame in the West, but he was famous amongst kind of Marxist intellectuals in Europe, and also in Russia he had a kind of underground following. So Anatoly, who later became an Anantashanti Prabhu, the Russian soldier who Srila Prabhupada spent 3 or 4 days giving personal instruction to, he said to Srila Prabhupada, you should come and meet Solzhenitsyn, who's in hiding, like in a little sort of village on the outskirts of Moscow. Srila Prabhupada told Shyama Sundara to go, and Shyama Sundara had a copy of Easy Journey to Other Planets, and which actually it was Malati who told Shyama Sundara to put it in the, I think Shyama Sundara didn't even know that it was there, but when he got to Russia he realized he had an Easy Journey to Other Planets. And they took it, but unfortunately Solzhenitsyn had gone into hiding, he wasn't there. But they gave that book to Galina Vishnevskaya, who was the wife of Mritislav Rostropovich, two famous musicians who'd actually been, they'd been looking after Solzhenitsyn for 3 years, keeping in seclusion. And actually, when I read some of Solzhenitsyn's essays recently, it seems like he read that book. It seems like he read Easy Journey to Other Planets, because he's talking about, in his essays, he's talking about how even though the Americans have, surpassed all previous levels of technological advancement and have been able to provide, health care for the majority of the population, and have, even put a man on the moon, supposedly. But still, they'd actually completely lost the goal of life. So it's amazing actually in intellectual circles, in journalistic circles, like people who write for intellectual newspapers and magazines, and they glorify many, many philosophers and freedom fighters and, revolutionary thinkers, but they never glorify Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was like, when you read his books alongside their books, you see that he had his book, Srila Prabhupada's books cover every issue that's brought up in all of the other philosophers' books. And it provides a solution. It actually provides a solution which is not there in any of their books. They're very good at analyzing the disease, and personally they may have very good qualities, but they're very pessimistic that actually human nature can change. But Srila Prabhupada knew that human nature could change because Krishna desires it, because Lord Chaitanya desires it, and because Lord Chaitanya's eternal associates, the Goswamis and many other of our acharyas, they desire it. So, we should feel empowered. We should feel empowered by Srila Prabhupada, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, by reading the books of our acharyas, and by practicing bhakti yoga. We actually are empowered to be able to preach to people who may be more intelligent academically, but they actually don't have a solution, and therefore they're actually very depressed. And because they're depressed, eventually they'll just fall down back to being like monkeys again. They'll just either due to complete frustration or just due to old age. Due to old age, they're all going to end up in nursing homes.
Just an interesting thing about old age, actually. It says there's only two parts of the body that don't stop growing, and that's the ears and the nose. So monkeys generally have quite big ears.
Yeah, and some of them have big noses as well. Yeah, and and actually, the Vedic culture, there are, many Indians still have a lot of faith in the principles of Vedic culture, and I've had the good fortune of staying in the homes of many Indian families. And, they do engage in a lot of tapasya, in the sense that they'll rise 2 hours earlier than their Western friends and do like an hour's puja in the morning, and and they'll fast on fast days, and they'll observe many yagyas, and so there's a lot of people out there who've got a little bit of the Vedic truth, who've got a little bit of the Indian population, the Hindu population, they've got a big chunk of like the Vedic culture. And then the Western intellectuals, they've got a big chunk of like Vedanta and introspection, which comes from India, from the Vedas. So, but it's actually really strange that Srila Prabhupada's never been given any recognition in these circles. And I can only assume that it's because he's just so honest. He won't compliment anybody. And then and especially in this condemnation of sex life, because irrespective of how astute a political commentator may be, or how much they support some revolutionary struggle in Peru or somewhere, they don't appreciate it if someone tells them that they shouldn't be having sex. So it's Dr. Prabhu.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, what's interesting about what's going on is that you won't see a lot of what's going on. But people have got Prabhupada's books of intelligence, and these people that are in positions of power, like when Boris Johnson came to the manor, they were saying to the devotees, "Okay, here's a meeting in we should show him respect because he must have a lot of security to get that position, so you should show respect in that sense. People don't get into those positions by being stupid and by breaking principles in the past lives. So they may have to toe the party line in so many ways, to keep the general populace happy. What's percolating underneath it all is that enlightened, quite intelligent people are in contact with Srila Prabhupada's books and are aware, like you say, they are reading. But it's just right now the forum is making it difficult for that to come in. But it's just a question of time. Prabhupada said once the books are entered, it's like a poison that goes into the bloodstream. Simple act. Go out and 500 million, 600 million.
It's interesting, Srila Prabhupada said his books will be the law books for mankind for the next 10,000 years, but he didn't say they'd be the law books for animalistic monkeys. So perhaps it'll be that they're not going to become the law books for the world's governments, but they'll become the law books for honest persons, for honest intellectuals or honest people who want to uphold animal rights and who are not attached to just some superficial movements, but who are actually looking for the truth, because that's what mankind is, mankind.
You see like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he rose to the highest position achievable in human society, and he was an Ichisiddha. So Lord Chaitanya, when he came down, he didn't come down on his own, and it's not that when he left, everyone else left with him. He was still his amazing personalities, so we can conclude from that in the future as well. Prabhupada said to his disciples, you were all associates of Lord Chaitanya. So it's no ordinary people that are coming in contact and doing things in Krishna consciousness, and there's no reason why they can't in the future become churches and take prominent positions of leadership in society.
Because that is humans. I mean, Hridayananda Maharaj very much kind of glorifies, in one sense, the Western tradition of justice and introspection and artistic excellence, and that somehow or other that has survived even through all of the wars and poverty and degradation.
You probably didn't go to the gallery just up Buchanan Street, the Glasgow Modern Art Gallery, because it looked like a chocolate box that had been trays taken out and been sprayed silver and it stuck onto a board. It was considered modern art.
And at least the building is nice anyway.
It's nice because it was built then. If you got something to build it that, it'd be something like the one in Edinburgh.
Oh, the turd. What the? All right,
It's like it's the foundation style to say.
Yeah, but sometimes they have to. Sometimes culture has to go through a period of disintegration and experimentation for a new renaissance to come. I was listening to Toksha's class yesterday online, and he was talking about the doors that we go through to attain the spiritual world. We kind of break through the door of material, physical attachment, and then we break through the door of kind of subtle mental attachments. And then we think, oh, great, only one more to get through the spiritual door. But then we realize that the handle's on the inside, not on the outside. And it reminded me of a nice meditation on the holy name, which is one of the mantratikas of Gopal Guru Goswami. And it's the fourth of the meditations, and it's Swabhakta Dwa Bhajan Gyan Danena Matritam Shadoi. Swabhakta Dwa, it means through the door of your devotees. Swabhakta Dwa. And it means let me become purified by learning how to worship you through the door of your devotees. And I was thinking that if we can all like be very like excited and enthusiastic to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission, then that's synonymous with being like serving his feet. We're always like just running after him. We're not trying to be like as big as him. So that when he goes through that door into the spiritual world, Krishna doesn't see us. He doesn't think, who are these 10,000 rascals? He just sees Srila Prabhupada, and we are just kind of little specks of dust on Srila Prabhupada's feet. And then we get in.
Srila Prabhupada said the secret of chanting is to be praying while you're chanting. Please keep me in the society of your service. And I was thinking that's interesting because service, you wouldn't necessarily think service implied society, but then the grace kind of opportunity for service is to other people. And so you'd need to be in a society to be able to do that. So Prabhupada's created the society for us, and we just have to bear to stay in it, because people do leave the society, they become deluded by the material energy or their monkey conditioning. So we're asserting our desire when we're chanting, please secure my place here in the society of your service.
Sometimes when I'm on that, in that, actually, are there any questions before I go over time? Is there anything online? Is it still running at Oxford, or is the computer still?
Lakshmi Krishna Swami, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Santi Mata Chara Richardson, Hare Krishna.
Okay, there's no questions, sir.
It's saying, can't sign into Google Drive, check out internet connection.
Okay.
No questions.
One thing, yeah, okay. So this word also, Vanara Jate, which means born from the monkeys. Prahlad Maharaj uses the word Ugra Jate when he says that I was born in a family of asuras, and therefore what hope have I got of satisfying the Lord? Because even the demigods and Lord Brahma can't satisfy the Lord. So, I was born in a much lower family. So even though Prahlad's a pure devotee and he actually was displaying ecstatic symptoms from childhood, and he was completely absorbed in Krishna Leela, still he's thinking, well, I was born into this family of like asuras, so I must have been like highly sinful in my previous life. He's not thinking that he's invincible. So, and because he's not thinking he's invincible, because he's thinking that he's very vulnerable to the material energy, then he always remains humble. So we should also feel like that even though we're living in a spiritual community and our whole lives are surrounded by Krishna's mercy, still we were born into a very degraded society, and therefore there must be, in our heart, there must be vestiges of that like demoniac mentality, which could like rise up again if we become complacent or if we become proud. So I'll stop there. Grancha Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shikodanataya Mai Poshashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki jai, Shri Giridhari Lal ki jai, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Have you heard anything from Mihai in the last few days?
I spoke with him yesterday. He's with his sister now.